give you incorrect information, but I'll be sure to follow up on that question.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Now Assistant General Manager of System-Wide Accessibility, Laura Brailsford, will present on freestanding mini-high platform initiatives.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board, General Manager. I'm pleased to be here with you again this afternoon. As you may remember from our discussion last month, although the MBTA has made a tremendous amount of progress with respect to accessibility over the last 15 years, we still have a lot of work to do. And one of our main areas of focus deals with the number of inaccessible stations that still remain in our system. That's why we're particularly excited to discuss today's topic with you, and that is an initiative that is going to allow us to significantly reduce the number of inaccessible stations in our commuter rail network relatively quickly. Before we get into that, I just wanted to provide a brief snapshot of the accessibility of our commuter rail network. We have just over 140 commuter rail stations in the system. Everything in a shade of blue here has some degree of accessibility, level boarding specifically at the station. But roughly 20%, 18% specifically, of our stations today have no accessibility, provide no accessibility whatsoever. Next slide. And just for additional context, I want to walk through the different types of platforms we have at our stations and the ways in which they provide or don't provide good accessibility. So starting with our full high-level platforms, these are our north stations, our south stations. These are platforms that are generally 800 feet in length. They are designed to run the full length of the train set, such to ensure that level boarding is provided at every single door of the train, so that anytime a door opens anywhere on the train set, people can step off directly onto the platform. This generally is the requirement for all new or altered stations. And by far and away, this provides the best accessibility, customer experience, and safest experience for our riders, not to mention provides major operational benefits in that it reduces the dwell time significantly. And just under 40% of our stations have full high platforms today. Next up is a somewhat novel platform type that we've been experimenting with, and that is one we refer to as short full high platforms. So short full high platforms can vary in length, but generally they are significantly less than 800 feet long. They are designed to provide level boarding at the doors at which the platforms align with. The big important piece to note about short full highs is that although they are short and they only line up with a subset of the train, there is no inaccessible portion of the platform. Everybody boards and exits from that raised platform. This is how we're providing service today at the interim Lynn station and how we're going to be providing service at North Wilmington by the end of this year. Next slide. And then we have our traditional mini-high platforms. These are platforms generally between 45 and 60 feet in length. They are designed to serve the first two cars of the train sets. Big distinction here is unlike the short full high platforms, stations where we have mini-highs, there's also about 700 feet of inaccessible platform still available for our riders. So for those riders requiring level boarding, they board using the mini-high. And then other riders can board using the low-level platform if they choose to. So it's not necessarily a fully integrated experience. This was an extremely common way of providing accessibility in the 90s and early 2000s, up until some additional regulations were passed. So it's not surprising we have a lot of these in our system. Over 40% of our stations have mini highs today. And then last but not least, of course, we have our low-level inaccessible platforms. No level boarding is provided here whatsoever, and customers must climb the stairs of the train to access our service. And we have 26 of those in service today, and that is really where we are centering our attention at the moment. How do we get that number down to 0? All right, so the immense challenge before us has been the fact that based on recent project costs, a typical comprehensive commuter rail station upgrade with full high-level platforms in the appropriate vertical circulation, elevators, and ramping structures runs anywhere between $55 million conservatively and $90 million plus, and takes anywhere between 4 to 8 years to design and construct a single commuter rail station. So if you do the math, if you take those 26 inaccessible stations and those cost estimates and timelines to get to a point in time where we are providing true full high-level quality accessibility at these stations, we're looking at well over $1 billion and well over 15 years. And that is something that we agree with our riders, the fact that that is simply too long to wait to provide some accessibility. The other way in which we are challenged is that the traditional mini highs I just discussed are no longer a viable interim solution. There's very clear federal regulations that say anytime you alter an inaccessible platform, it triggers the obligation to make that platform fully accessible, generally meaning full high-level platforms. So because our traditional mini highs were typically installed using very robust piles that were secured deep into the earth below the platform, even putting in a traditional mini high would trigger an immediate obligation to make a significant investment in these locations for which we simply don't have adequate resources at the moment. Next slide. So with that in mind, over the last couple of years, we have been focused on figuring out a way to thread this needle. How do we provide good, high-quality accessibility in the short term without necessarily triggering an immediate obligation at all of these locations? And we posed a challenge to our engineering team, who is here with us today, to say, is it possible to develop a design, an entirely freestanding structure that essentially we can just sit on top of the existing inaccessible platform? There was a fair amount of skepticism at the outset about whether or not that was feasible, whether or not that would be a secure structure. But after some trial and error and a lot of work, we have identified a solution. So today we have plans for what we're calling our freestanding mini highs that essentially are recycled bridge decks at most locations that sit on top of giant concrete slabs, which sit on top of steel plates, which sit on top of the low-level platform. Absolutely no cutting or alteration to that low-level platform is required. Next slide. So With this solution in hand, we have been working to identify which of those 26 inaccessible stations is a good fit for this solution. Because we need to make sure we're putting these at locations that don't require major vertical circulation or have very complicated topography. And based on our reviews so far, there are roughly 12 of the 26 stations where we are optimistic we're going to be able to construct and drop these platforms into place. As we do that, we're also going to be going in and addressing any minor to moderate accessibility issues like broken sidewalks or inaccessible parking spaces. And based on the first 4 stations we're working on, the total cost of upgrading one of our current stations with these new freestanding platforms, along with those minor upgrades, is about $3 million a piece. So the very exciting news is our engineering team, again here today, along with Railroad Ops, has been working to design and implement these solutions at four stations: Wellesley Square, West Medford, Franklin, and Walpole. Those decisions were largely driven by feedback directly from riders with disabilities. And construction activities are about to start at the end of this month. In addition to the cost being so much more reasonable, the timeline is really exciting too. We are optimistic that those 4 locations will be completed by the very end of this year, that we will have a good, safe, and accessible options for people at these locations by the end of the year. The other great thing is thanks to fair share funding, we believe we have enough funding to move forward with the next 5 of locations. And designs are just getting underway for those. So we're optimistic by next summer, we will have 9 of these freestanding stations online. Next slide. And then, assuming we are able to secure some additional funding as we move into next year, we also believe that there's another 4 stations: Wellesley Hills, Greenwood, Melrose, Cedar Park, and Belmont, that may be well suited for this solution. All right, next slide. And I want to emphasize here that this is very exciting, but it's a critical step in a longer-term strategy. So, roughly broken into 2 phases. Phase 1, priority 1, is how do we get people on and off trains safely at all stations? How do we address those 26 inaccessible stations? In addition to the freestanding initiative I just mentioned, we have major upgrades that are going to be wrapping up at Natick, Winchester, and North Wilmington by the beginning of next year. Then we have these 12 to 13 stations at which we believe the freestanding platforms are a good fit. That's 16 stations right there resolved. And then we believe at Islington, Kendall Green, and Shirley, these are very, very small stations, that the short, full-height platform may be a perfect solution at those locations, which leaves us with 7 remaining inaccessible stations. There are no easy answers at these 7 locations. These are all stations that have really complicated topography or curvature of the track. So we are going to beginning designs for like full height double platforms or something creative as we're implementing the shorter term solutions at the other locations. So that really is phase 1. How do we get something at every single station? And then phase 2 is how do we go back? What is our strategy for going back? And anywhere we have a mini high, whether it's freestanding or not, how do we prepare to build out a strategy to make those full high level, fully accessible, inclusive stations that certainly is a daunting prospect based on the cost projections I shared a minute ago. But it's something that we will chip away at. But bottom line, by this time next year, we believe that we will have gone from 26 inaccessible stations down to 14. And with that, I will take any questions.
Any questions for Laura?
I have a couple. No, you go. Thank you, Director. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate you and the work you do. Question about the regulation. Is there a time stipulation that we have to adhere to?
Is there a time stipulation? So there are generally no time stipulations in this context. The federal regulation that we are most concerned with honoring and working within, it really is all about as soon as we alter a platform, we need to move forward with making it fully accessible, meaningful, high-level platforms. So it's our position that if we just drop in these freestanding platforms and we don't do anything else to alter that platform or alter a stairway, we haven't triggered the obligation. Now, at some point in the future, when that freestanding platform is there, if the platform has to be significantly repaved or replaced due to just general degradation, we're likely going to then trigger the obligation, and then all sorts of time expectations begin. But we don't believe there's any clock that gets started through these platforms.
Thank you. A follow-up question is how much, what dollar amount is allocated to accessibility in the CIP?
System-wide or for this? Can you repeat the question?
What dollar amount is allocated for accessibility in the CIP? I guess system-wide would be.
So if you look at the 5-year CIP, there are, if you pull out all the projects that include some significant benefit to accessibility, there's roughly $1 billion worth of projects in there, not including vehicles. Now, I want to acknowledge that some of those price tags include significant station work that is not directly related to accessibility, but accessibility is a big part of the upgrade. So we have a pretty strong pipeline right now of major projects, particularly on the Green Line and a number of our rapid transit stations.
Thank you.
So, Laura, how long have you been in this role?
I've been in this role for just about 12 years, and I've been with MBTA for just over 15.
I just want to commend you for being such a fabulous problem solver. Like when I read the materials and you're talking about 26 stations would have cost us $1.25 billion and 5 years to build, you've given us a strategy that can have 13 built over the course of 12 months. This is the kind of innovation and sort of really good project management and leadership we want to see across the board. So I just wanted to say kudos to you. And when we do this kind of work, we not only are able to address the needs of those that are, mobility accessible, but moms with strollers, people that need to walk, elderly, folks that need more time. So just thank you and kudos to you for really
I
good work.
very much appreciate it, but I also have to acknowledge I have an incredible team
Fabulous
with
team,
me today,
good
and
job.
also everything we do is in conjunction with our peer departments, right? For accessibility to work, it requires every department here to really step up and be engaged. And on this initiative in particular, between our capital team and railroad apps, safety and others, and our leadership, we've had continuous leadership support over the years. We've been able to make some real progress.
Yeah. We often hear about things that don't work, and when things are working really, really well, it's important for us to recognize it as a board. So kudos to you and your team and GM Eng for the leadership.
Very much
I echo
appreciate it.
that
Thank you.
sentiment too. Thank you.